Hello, and welcome to another roundup of a dozen dukes to add to your TBR. I'm Olivia, your favorite resource for book recommendations you can easily screenshot, and you're watching Random Olive Reads. Second Duke's the Charm by Kate Bateman is book one of the Her Majesty's Rebel series. Now, how many tropes can you roll into a single book? In this one, we've got a virgin widow, female detectives, a one night stand in disguise, and a widow with her late husband's heir. Oh, and a marriage of convenience. Tess becomes a widow to her much older husband on her wedding night and then uses her newfound freedom and independence to open an investigative agency with her two best friends. 2 years later, wealthy shipping merchant Justin is identified as the next Duke and stops by a scandalous house party on his way to claiming the title. There, he meets Tess in disguise, and they have an amorous encounter as strangers, neither realizing that they will soon meet under different circumstances. When they properly meet at a ball, Justin immediately proposes a marriage of convenience to Tess, since it will save Justin the trouble of finding a proper wife, and they get to continue their physical relationship. From there, we navigate a relationship where Tess is trying really hard not to fall in love, and Justin is denying that he has a heart. We also have Tess and her friends working on a case in secret in the background, and there's definitely a lot of things going on in this one. A Duke's Lesson in Charm by Sophie Barnes is book three of the Gentleman Author series. Callum and Emily have known and avoided each other for years because they keep having physical mishaps and calamities with each other, including trodden toes, ruined gowns, falling in water, and even a dress burn. It's fairly obvious to the reader that Callum is clumsy because he's nervous around Emily, though she hasn't seen it that way. One day at the park, Callum's orphaned ward seems to perk up when coming across Emily's dog, and Callum arranges for the boy to spend more time with the dog. Callum and Emily talk out their clumsiness and misunderstandings and slowly develop a friendship with each other. It's nice seeing them interact and form a little bit of a family unit around Callum's ward. And when Emily's grandmother is ill, she lies about a courtship with Callum to make her happy. You're the Duke That I Want by Lenora Bell is book one of the Thunderbolt Club series. This book is a super fun Grease retelling, with Sandrine being the sheltered young miss who meets Lord Dane, pretending to be a simple Danny, at the seaside. Lord Dane is typically a scoundrel and a rake, but he's kind and sweet, and he enjoys being with Sandrine at the seaside. He leaves unexpectedly when his brother is gravely injured, and he's concerned now that he's the heir to a dukedom. Sandrine ends up traveling to London to petition a certain duke to restore an old manor house, and is pretty angry to find out that Dane has both lied to her and ends up related to the duke that owns the manor. With a new set of lady friends, Sandrine gets to experience more of London adventures away from her overly strict mother, while also continuing to run into Dane. There's a lot of interesting plot going on here, with Dane dealing with a blackmailer and Sandrine breaking free from her mother's constraints. Never Defy a Duke by Christy Carlisle is book three of the Rogues rulebook series. We have a Duke's heir Gray being set up at a house party full of eligible ladies, except he only cares for his childhood friend Evie, who somehow isn't considered eligible. Of course, they've both been attracted to each other for ages, and somehow seeing Gray on the cusp of marriage to someone else has sparked Evie's jealousy. This one has a quick resolution once Gray figures out who it is he really wants to marry. The Governess and the Duke by Lydia Drake is book two of the Renegade Dukes series. Viola is the governess to one duke's rambunctious ward with a long-standing crush on that duke's best friend. When traveling with her charge, the teenage girl falls and sprains her ankle, forcing the pair to stay at James's ducal castle. Although James has been hiding away in the country after the embarrassment of a rejected proposal, he finds himself intrigued and attracted to Viola and wondering why he had never noticed her before. Both James and Viola try to fight their attraction to each other at first, being of different social standing, but that doesn't last for too long. Viola's charge and James's sister become fast friends and cause all sorts of trouble, which is humorous to read. Every Duke Has His Day by Suzanne Enoch is a standalone novel. This one is light and funny, low steam here. Socially awkward Duke Michael would rather be at home working on his chemistry experiments, but finds himself caring for his aunt's beloved poodle while she is out of town. While he's out walking the dog in the park, he meets Elizabeth, a popular debutante who has her own menace of a poodle. When the two dogs get into a tussle at the park, somehow Michael and Elizabeth each go home with the wrong dog. Michael is forced to go out in public to correct the mistake, but ends up in even more drama when it's discovered that Elizabeth's home has been broken into and the dog has been stolen. This book gives us multiple points of view, so we do know early on who's responsible for the dog napping, but we get to see Michael and Elizabeth work together to recover the missing dog. While these two are seemingly total opposites, we get to see them start to slowly recognize and appreciate the other person's unique qualities. Plus, we have Michael's complete dedication to the dog search, and there were tons of humorous moments in this book. The Duke's Counterfeit Wife by Caroline Lee is book 3 of the Surprise Duke series. The setup of this book is totally crazy and definitely not historically accurate, but the author totally acknowledges this in the author's note before you even start the book. An elderly duke in the Highlands sets a contest in the newspaper to select his next heir out of a list of distantly related contenders. One of the eligible candidates is Griffin, an ex spy and single father who's trying to keep a low profile and keep his kids out of danger. He lives next door to Felicity and her teenage son, who inconveniently comes over through a door on a shared wall between their homes to spend time with his new best friend, Griffin's daughter. The kids come up with a scheme to claim the inheritance and somehow wrangle their respective parents into a fake marriage to win the dukedom. There's a ton of calamity and humor here with our blended family, but the Duke and his secretary are very understanding and kind. My Once and Future Duke by Caroline Linden is book 1 of the Wagers of Sin series. This book starts with a tragic prologue for Sophie, an orphan who is discarded by her Viscount grandfather at a girls' school. Her mother was an opera singer, and her father defied his family's wishes to marry her. And when they passed away, they left Sophie with very little support. She befriends her two roommates at school and uses cards to teach mathematics to one of the girls until they're caught. Fast forward to present day, and we start with Jack's point of view, where he's bailing his brother out of debt at a gambling hell. He sees a beautiful woman gambling with his brother, who just said he was going to stay away from gambling, and somehow ends up winning a week of her company. Now an adult and without any means of support, Sophie has decided upon gambling as her occupation until she can save enough money to invest and live on. While her bet with Jack is terribly scandalous, she is both angry and intrigued by him. They do end up spending time together at one of his country homes, stuck there with the rain and poor road conditions, and quite obviously fall in love. However, Jack is the ever sensible and dutiful Duke who proposes a liaison instead of marriage and bungles the whole thing up. It'll take a bit of suffering on his part before he gets it right. It Had to Be a Duke by Vivian Lorette is book 1 of the Liars Club series. Verity is the oddball of her family, being sensible and plain, rather than an outrageous actor. Faced with an embarrassing situation with her catty neighbor, she makes up a lie that she's engaged to a duke. When Magnus hears a rumor about this from the father of the heiress he wants to marry, he runs off to the village where Verity lives to settle the issue. Magnus and Verity are long-standing family rivals from a time when Magnus's father lost a lot of money in an investment, and he thinks it was because of Verity's father. He definitely doesn't want to be associated with Verity or her family, but he seems to need to rescue her from her own clumsiness and daring. He's also annoyingly stiff and proper and sometimes even mean to her. Of course, he's only mean to her because he's attracted and he doesn't know what to do with it. They continue a temporary fake engagement so he doesn't appear outwardly cruel, and he slowly starts to soften towards her. There's definitely a lot of grudge holding and angry bickering in the story, so it's interesting to see how these two find common ground. Not the Duke You Marry by Jess Michaels is book 3 of the Kent's Row Duchesses series. With both of her widowed friends married now, Bernadette is feeling lonely and undesirable. She expresses her interest in finding a lover to Theo, a childhood friend who she recently reconnected with. His aghast reaction makes her feel horribly rejected and insecure, but she rallies and finds her way to a pleasure club. When Theo sees her there, he tries to emphasize how dangerous her actions are, but really he just lusts after her himself and is conflicted about his feelings. These two go back and forth a bit, but end up having an affair and try really hard not to fall in love with each other. It's Hard Out Here for Duke by Maya Rodell is book 4 of the Keeping Up with the Cavendishes series. James and his sisters are bound for London to take up his new role as a duke, but he enjoys one last night as just James with a beautiful woman he meets at a tavern. Meredith is traveling back to her role as a duchess's companion when she meets James's eye across the tavern and decides to take this one opportunity for passion before she continues being a proper companion. Of course, they're in for some bad luck when they realize that they're stuck in the same household with completely different social stations, and they need to forget that their one night stand ever happened. While James struggles with his new role and responsibilities, he's continually tempted by the presence of Meredith and wishes he can give everything up to be with her instead. Meredith is one that's usually sensible and explains to James the ways of the ton and how their relationship would be completely inappropriate. However, all the hints of the relationship between James and Meredith that we've seen from the previous books in the series come into full force in this one, where they need to decide what's really important to them. Taming the Savage Duke by Barbara Russell is book 1 of the Victorian Outcast series. There is a chaos and tragedy for everyone involved in this book. Maddie is on the cusp of receiving entry into a prestigious art academy, but an accident involving an overzealous botanist ruins her painting and injures her hand, and so she's unable to paint. Hector is the younger brother of a duke who wants acceptance into his own scientific academy and accidentally injures Maddie in an attempt to collect a rare plant. He feels horribly guilty for her injury and only takes his place on a South American expedition after she encourages him to leave. Unfortunately, his ship goes down before he even reaches his destination and he's declared dead. 8 years later, Hector is found alive, having survived alone on an island all this time. And in this time, his brother and mother had both passed away, and his horrible cousin is now the Duke. Maddie gets involved to assist Hector in regaining his manners and civility to gain his title back. The romance here is slow and sweet and low angst while we work through all of the external struggles that Maddie and Hector have. This book was action-packed and kept me enthralled the whole way through. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you found a book or two to add to your TBR. Links to all of these books are in the description box. Like and subscribe to get updates, and you can follow me on Instagram @randomolive.